Beyond the Badge is brought to you by the Edina Crime Prevention Fund and AAA Minneapolis.
A former Edina resident recently faced her childhood sex abuser in a New Jersey court 22 years after the crime took place. That abuser, 57-year-old Maria Patamia, pled guilty to criminal sexual contact with the then 14-year-old girl. Although Patamia was convicted of hugging the child for her own sexual gratification, the police department's investigation indicated much worse occurred in both New Jersey and Edina. Out of respect for the victim, Edina Investigates will not name the victim, but what you are about to watch is her story.
When it first kind of, occurred to me that I had been sexually abused, that's kind of the first place you jump to is like, why didn't anybody stop this?
Early 2015, we received information that there had been a sexual assault that occurred in New Jersey and Edina, 1993 to 94.
Okay, Marie, I'm going to take you back to 1993, and at that time, you were a teacher in the Mount Olive School District in Morris County in New Jersey. Is that correct?
Correct.
And in the middle school, you became familiar with a student with the initials of. Is that correct?
Correct.
And at the time, she was 14 years of age?
Correct.
The spring of 1993 is when the abuse started, and then it continued for a little over a year into the spring of 94, a little bit past that.
She asked me to be one of the managers for her basketball team. She was the 8th grade girls varsity basketball coach, and so she asked me and a friend of mine to volunteer to be the manager. So we spent a lot of time working with her on that. We were always with the team at practices. We were before and after practices, and she would drive me home after practices or games if they were late.
The grooming is very classic, and so what it is they start to build the trust, not just with the victim, but with the family, the other people around them.
Now, the school year ended in June, and was now no longer your student. Is that correct?
Correct.
And in fact, she was going to go to the high school beginning in the fall, I guess, of 1993, and you were not going to be a teacher there. Is that correct?
Correct.
As it was winding down the school year, the 8th grade school year, I think probably she was trying to figure out how to keep me around.
However, you did, in July of 1993, worked for you at a flea market in Pennsylvania. Is that correct?
Correct.
At that point, I talked with my parents, and I think they talked with my parents and agreed that I would work with them on Saturdays and Sundays.
And since you started early in the flea market, requested to stay over at your house one night in July of 1993 so that you could all drive together to the flea market. Is that correct?
It became, wouldn't it just be easier if I slept over at our house so that we could just leave in the morning? And unfortunately, my parents said yes, and that's when the real sexual abuse started. One of the hardest things for me, particularly because deceased, is that she was in the room every single time. Every single time. She never touched me sexually. She never touched me. But she was there every single time. On the floor, in a chair. She was always there.
While was at your house, there came a time where you hugged it. Is that correct?
Yes.
And in the course of that, you touched her breast. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you did so for your own sexual gratification. Is that correct?
Yes.
It was like late at night, it was dark. And when we left, Maria got into the back seat with me, which was strange. And she laid my head, kind of pulled me, so she laid my head down on her lap and kissed me. And that was the first, sexual abuse. That was the first time that happened, was in this car, in the dark, driving down the highway. I know that I was terrified. I remember being incredibly hot. Like, I felt like I was on fire. That's the physical feeling I can remember.
And this girl at the time, probably through the eyes of a 14-year-old, doesn't see this as abuse. She sees this as loving and caring and nurturing. A case like this It's about the sex and the abuse, but it's also about power and control.
With you, I thought that I was in a relationship. I did. I thought that I was in a loving relationship with an adult, and I thought that I was just, waiting to get older. She gave me a lot of things, and it started out kind of small, just like random, like a CD or a tape that I liked or whatever, all the way up to jewelry, like gold jewelry, earrings, a ring, bracelet, necklace.
They just slowly start to build that trust, and to the point where they're allowed to go on trips. Maria brought this young girl to New York City for a concert, and they stayed in a hotel. They went to this concert, they showered her, they told her how wonderful she was. She felt like a queen. She felt like really important, and to be downtown Manhattan and watching a concert. And then back at the hotel is when there was more abuse that took place. People should have known that there was something improper here, especially when the victim and her family moved to Edina, Minnesota, and the teacher came to Edina, stayed with the family, and then abused this young girl in her own basement.
You can just not pick up the phone. And if you're 3,000 miles away or whatever, there's nothing that anyone can do about it.
What made the abuse stop in this case is that the victim moved out of state. So that physical distance, I think, really helped with the fact that the perpetrator and the victim were able to distance themselves from each other.
How do you plead at this time to the offense of criminal sexual contact in the 4th degree?
Guilty.
The court will accept a guilty plea from Ms. Patamia.
I think parents today, even still, you are more comfortable with a female. A female is more disarming, And if your daughter is suddenly hanging out with this female constantly, maybe you do need to check in on that. Maybe that's not just, maternal or sisterly or just best friends. Maybe there's more to it, And I think awareness is important in all, relationships between children and adults.
Look for gifts. Look for changes in behavior in your child. Are they not sleeping? Are they not eating? Are they acting out? In these cases, a child might not come out immediately and say, hey, this is what's happening to me. So you as a parent really have to be diligent in looking for any of these red flags. What's unique about the victim's case in this circumstance is that the perpetrator was a female. Because what we typically see is the perpetrators or offenders, about 90 to 95% are male. With any sexual abuse, it's not like once the abuse stops, then they can kind of move on. No, it's going to have long-term effects.
It hit hard, like, holy this happened to me. And in that, realization, kind of recognized things that I had been suffering and going through. I was a wreck, for lack of better words. I could not drive. For years and years and years, I suffered panic attacks while driving, particularly on the highway. I think my relationships with women in general have been difficult in my life. I'm terrible at, getting to that point of closeness with a friend where you kind of break down every barrier and I'm done. I bolt because I think that I, deep down I'm afraid of what's going to happen next.
What it shows you is anybody can be a victim, and anybody can get wrapped up and controlled by a predator. And I think the other part of this story that's important is that it tells people who have been victims of sex abuse victims, that you can come forward. You can still come forward years later, and we'll still take it serious. We'll still investigate it, and if there's a case there, we're going to prosecute and we're going to go after these people. And the message to the predators out there is that it doesn't matter how many years go by. If you abuse somebody, we're going to track you down, we're going to find you, and we're going to hold you accountable.
This is probably a lifetime battle, There's always something. It's hard to kind of put words on that, but there's always something.
If you are a victim of sexual abuse or know someone who is, contact your local police department and file a report.